Republicans, as expected, blocked a vote on the minimum wage.
The American people want to know who's going to create jobs.
Democrats today plotting strategy.
Who's going to create growth in our country?
To turn the Republican-led filibuster.
I really don't understand this Republican filibuster.
Of a Senate proposal to raise the federal minimum wage to their advantage.
I think it's malarkey. I don't believe there ought to be a national minimum wage.
This is outrageous.
It should be reasonably adjusted from time to time.
I think it's malarkey.
But I really don't understand this Republican filibuster.
I believe that markets work better than bureaucrats.
I developed a very different theory about what makes an economy grow.
I think it's malarkey.
If you work 40 hours a week, you should not be living in poverty.
Republicans insist the Democratic proposal would be too expensive.
Diversion, subterfuge.
We're not having honest debates.
They won't raise wages for millions of working families? That makes no sense.
Just today in Seattle, the Democratic mayor, Ed Murray, announced that he brought labor and business leaders to the table for a joint plan to raise the minimum wage there, moving up to $15 per hour, which would be the highest in the nation.
What we step towards, I think, is a progressive path about how you can deal with the issue of income equality. I should say we are blessed with businesses that were willing to sit down at a table and agree to $15 an hour. That is something that shouldn't be lost on folks.
Minnesota's Democratic governor addressed his state on the results of a recent wage hike there.
When the legislature increased the state's minimum wage and indexed it to inflation. When fully in effect, 325,000 Minnesotans will earn almost $500 million more every year. Those increases will be enormously important to those workers and their families. They'll use that money to give their children better lives. They'll use it to buy necessities, and much of that will be spent quickly and locally.
Republicans should support a reasonable increase in the minimum wage. If you're going to talk the talk about being for the middle class and the working person, if we have a minimum wage, it should be reasonably adjusted from time to time. And for all the Republicans who come on and talk about, we're for the blue-collar worker, we're for the working person, there's some basic things that we should be for. One of them is the reasonable increases from time to time in the minimum wage.
A recent poll found 65% of voters favoring increasing that federal minimum.
You have pretty distinct periods in American economic policymaking, and the reason you have that is that the fundamental conditions of the American economy change over time. One of the major issues you had in the 70s preceding Reagan, obviously, is the huge oil shock. That was also a supply-side shock. Then you have, in the Clinton years, you have interest rates that are too high, so Clinton is a real deficit hawk. He brings down the deficit pretty substantially. Interest rates come down in part because of that, and that is one of the contributors to growth in that period. Then you have, in the Obama years, a huge financial crisis. Now interest rates are incredibly low, and so you don't need to worry about the deficit as much. There is a genuinely serious problem when a political movement decides that it has found unchanging economic truth, and it doesn't need to update itself according to different times. And you see that with the minimum wage. Plenty, I think, put it fairly well, that there are over time, because the minimum wage is not indexed to inflation, you need to raise it just so it is keeping pace with the economy. This is not the application of some new theory. It's not even really a raising of the minimum wage. It is simply keeping the former policy steady as it goes. And I think there's a bit of a trouble in the Republican Party right now to simply update the economic philosophy to a very changed economy in which median wages are very, very weak, in which job creation is very, very weak, and in which people need a little bit more help.
There's no partisan gap here. When you ask people, are you concerned about your income keeping up with the cost of living, independents, Democrats, and Republicans all overwhelmingly say yes, in the high 70s and low 80s there, Ezra. So even well above the income bracket of minimum wage workers, people have this concern right now.
And this is why you see such overwhelming support for it. Something that we don't talk enough about in the economy is power, is the idea of bargaining power, of leverage. And one thing that is a long-running economic trend right now is that workers are losing power in the economy. They've lost unions, the minimum wage is getting weaker. There are a variety of things happening. You have a slacker labor market, so there are more individual unemployed workers coming at any given job. So again, the employer has more ability to set the wage low, or if he does hire somebody, can fire that person very simply. One thing the minimum wage does is it is a way of the government weighing in for workers and giving them power to negotiate a bottom level wage. And that's just something that I think you're going to see in a lot of different proposals coming forward, and you're going to see sort of reflected in the polling across a lot of different proposals. Workers understand they've lost a lot of power. They don't quite know how to get it back, and the minimum wage is a simple, necessary, and possibly insufficient way to do it, but they know they've lost power.